Hello, welcome to this series of videos where I'm going to try to teach you how to get your Ryu all the way from Iron rank up into Master. We're going to be going one grade at a time, introducing a few skills, a few drills, a few things you need to know to get past that grade. And by grade, I mean like Bronze 1, Bronze 2, Bronze 3, not just Bronze, Silver, Gold. I know there is a lot of content out there for Street Fighter and Street Fighter 6 especially, but a lot of that content is aimed at much more advanced players, talking about things like whiff punishing. Whiffing doesn't even really happen in a meaningful way until Diamond 4 and 5, so you don't need to worry about that stuff. And I didn't see a lot of content on YouTube that's really aimed at super basic beginner stuff. So I want to set up a series of videos that's all about how to do that. I'm going to do it for Ryu first and then for Luke. These are the two characters that I've got to Master rank. I think they're also two pretty simple, straightforward characters that really are about the core basics of the game. So we're going to do it first with Ryu because he's the one I've got most recently to Master. He's the one that most people seem to be using. Luke seems much less popular, even though I would say he is generally better than Ryu and generally kind of easier to use in this game. Anyway, let's get into it. And the first thing that you've got to know is how to get into training mode. So I'm going to show you here in the main menu. You've probably done a bit of World Tour, hopefully. Maybe you've looked at the Battle Hub, but probably not. You want to go over here to Fighting Ground. You want to go over to Practice Mode. Maybe you want to do some combo trials, but really we just want to get into training. Doesn't really matter what stage you pick, but the training room is nice. And then we're just going to have Ryu on both sides of the ledger using his second color. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, let me say a few things about Street Fighter. Street Fighter, relative to other video games, is, I think, a very, very hard game. It's also a very frustrating game because the ranking system is built in such a way that you are likely only going to be winning about 45% of your matches at any time. Now, some of the people who've been in the game for a long time will complain about this. They'll be like, all these people think they're good because they made it to Master and their win percentage is only 45%. Yeah, but people who have higher than 45% win percentage are the kind of people who are on like 1650 MR. That's when you start to get 50% win percentage. Right, so it takes a really, really long time before you actually start winning a decent amount. That doesn't mean that you're not bad. It just means that you're going to be losing a lot, so you need to get used to that. The game is also extremely deep. So there are so many layers to this. A lot of those layers, a lot of the techniques in the game are extremely advanced and don't really work nor are worth using unless your opponent is similarly advanced. So often you really need your opponent to know what's going on before you can condition them to do certain things. So again, we don't really need to worry about these advanced tactics. We need something simple. And what I'm going to try to do in each of these videos is give you some concepts, some drills, and then a game plan that integrates all those concepts. And then you can take that game plan up to the next rank, and then you can watch the next video and I'll show you some more concepts, some more drills, and a new game plan. All right, let's talk about Ryu a tiny bit. So Ryu is a kind of middling character in this game. He hasn't been particularly great in Street Fighter for a while. Unfortunately, in Street Fighter 6, I don't think he's going to be good until his drive rush gets better. He has one of the weaker drive rushes in the game because it's quite slow and it doesn't go especially far. So if you compare his drive rush to someone like Ken will go from here to here in like half a second and be ready to wail on you. And this becomes quite a big problem once you get up to like Platinum or something like that, but we really don't need to worry about it down here. On the positive side, Ryu is a very easy character to control. All his moves just use the basic quarter circle forward, quarter circle back, and dragon punch motions. All right, and they're things that you really need to get the hang of, and otherwise his buttons are also pretty straightforward, and he only has a few extra buttons, unlike, say, Dalsum, who has 1,000,001 different command normals. Finally, Ryu has a very simple game plan. He doesn't have, and this is one of his weaknesses, I guess, any sort of scummy ways to get into your opponent's face or to otherwise be a really annoying, cheap nuisance. He's really about having good fundamentals, but he does have a very simple game plan in the lower ranks, which is fireball and anti-air when people try to jump over your fireball. He also has a nice poke in medium kick, and his heavy punch is also a pretty good poke, and you can just be doing this for a lot of the early stages of the game. Right, finally he's got a pretty nice sweep, which is also something that you use quite a lot. There's heaps more I could say about Ryu, but probably that's for later videos when we get more advanced. All right, so what do we need to learn to get our Ryu into iron ranks? All right, the first thing I'm going to do here is show you a little bit through the menu. So anytime you're in the menu, you can press Q plus E on your keyboard. I'm not sure what it is on pad. I use a like a hitbox, so an arcade stick that doesn't have a stick for movement. It's got buttons. So it's pretty similar to a keyboard, but you can press like 6 buttons at once and it will understand what you're saying, whereas a keyboard won't let you do that. So I don't recommend playing on a keyboard, but also if you're playing on a gamepad, like on a PlayStation, that's totally fine. Like Mena and Punk, who are arguably the 2 best players in the world right now, they use gamepads, and I generally think gamepad is probably the best way to go because it's so easy to have macros set up for parry, drive impact, that sort of thing on your trigger buttons. Anyway, if you press 2 buttons, you'll get back to this main screen, and here we want to go to restart battle, and this resets the neutral. And then there's going to be a button that you can set here in the shortcut settings for save status and restart battle. And we want to discover what that button is, so it's going to be different for you than it is for me because I'm playing on this hitbox, but in any case we want to save current state. And that means that if we change things around, we can always press the button to restart that will take us back to that save state. And we're going to be using this a lot throughout all these videos. All right, so let's go to restart battle, save state. All right, now the first thing you're going to want to learn to do in this game is just to do some special moves. All right, so well, maybe before that, just like press all your buttons. So we've got light punch, medium punch, heavy punch, light kick, medium kick, heavy kick, and then we can do the same thing in the air. Yeah, and in crouch. And you're going to want to learn what all of these buttons do. And then if you go to the command list, you will also find that Ryu has a series of these unique attacks, sometimes called command normals, and these are also worth learning. So let's have a look at those. So he's got forward medium punch, that's an overhead. So if your opponent is crouch blocking, it's going to hit them. He's got forward heavy punch, the solar plexus, which we'll use a lot. He's got forward heavy kick, which we'll use a fair bit in the higher ranks. He's got back heavy kick, which we'll use very little, but there's one use for it that's quite important. What else has he got? He's got these target combos. We don't really need to worry about those till much later. So anyway, just explore Ryu's buttons, then come back to this setting, and we're going to learn to do his special moves. So again, you can go to the command list, have a look at his special moves: Hadouken, Shoryuken, the Dragon Punch, Tatsumaki Senpu Kyaku, usually just called Tatsu, Aerial Tatsu, which I honestly have like never used, but there is one use for it that I know of. It's just a bit complicated. Donkey Kick or Blade Kick, usually called Donkey Kick, which we do use a lot in combos. Hashogeki, which is your kind of short range fireball, and the Denjin Charge. All right, so what you want to do is come back into training mode here and just try to execute all of these moves 10 times in a row. So if we're going to do quarter circle forward, we've got to do down, down, forward, forward. And you can see on the left-hand side of the screen there, my inputs, right? So learn to read that screen, okay? If you're doing something wrong, like this, and you're not getting a fireball, you can go and check on the left-hand side why you're not getting a fireball. And you can see there that I only pressed down, and then I went back to neutral, which means I wasn't pressing anything, and then I pressed forward, right? And that's why I didn't get a fireball, because we didn't have the down forward input, the diagonal, right? So we need to get that diagonal before we get a fireball. All right, now you'll see that my dummy is jumping around like a lunatic, so we don't want him doing that. That's in reversal settings, which we'll worry about a bit later. All right, so I'm just going to turn off all his reversals for now. Okay, restart the match. All right, so we just want to be able to do 10 fireballs from one side of the screen. All right, and we're going to use light fireball. Just trust me on this. 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, and then we want to do the same thing for Dragon Punch. Now for Dragon Punch, maybe we can stand up closer to Ryu, save our play state, and then we're going to do Dragon Punch. Now one tip for Dragon Punch is that obviously the first part of the Dragon Punch is forward. So anytime you're walking forward, it's easier to input a Dragon Punch than if you're walking backwards. That's going to be really important later when we start talking about anti-airs. But for now, just walk into Ryu and then do the fireball motion, and you'll have it. All right? Walk into Ryu, do the fireball motion. All right, and we'll start with heavy Dragon Punch. All right, once you've done a few, just come back to the beginning. And as you get more comfortable with it, try and do it without that forward walk at the start. Just do it quickly with your fingers like you're playing piano. Sure you can. Sure you can. Get 10. All right, once you've done 10 of all of these moves on the left side, then you want to come into your settings again and go to environment settings. And here, instead of being on the left, you want to be on the right. And here we are. And now again, we're just going to throw some fireballs, maybe try pressing 2 punches so that you get the OD version. That's quite important for Ryu. Right. Throw a couple of different fireballs, so light, medium, heavy. Look at the difference. OD, nice and fast. Maybe even do some Denjin charge fireballs. All right. Once you've got all that, then we're back over here doing Dragon Punches. You'll find that it's probably harder for you on this side, certainly is for me, because your fingers just don't like to move in certain ways. But in any case, you can practice all that sort of stuff. All right, once we've got our super moves, our special moves down, then we want to move on to our next skill. So we had our knowledge, which is that we have these particular special moves. And then we had a drill for it, which is just practicing getting 10 out of 10 on the left and the right side. The next thing we're going to do is learn to move. Now, you'll see a lot of videos on the internet that are basically about moving better. And it can be very layered, and there can be a lot of complex aspects to it. We're going to focus on some really basic stuff here today. The first thing is don't be doing this with Ryu. All right, you don't want to get into the corner in this game, because in the corner, it's very easy for people to drive impact to you. And then you might eat a ton of damage. All right, and we don't want that. Okay, so don't be jumping backwards. The reason why most people jump backwards is because they think Ryu is a zoner. They think what he's supposed to do is throw fireballs and keep his opponent out. So when the opponent gets close to you, you try to jump back. That doesn't really work, because walk speed forward for most characters is almost as fast as someone jumping back. It's also the case, though, more importantly, that Ryu is not a zoner. So your fireball is really a tool to annoy your opponent and control space and kind of dictate the terms of the engagement. But actually, Ryu mostly wants to be playing around here. This is the kind of range that Ryu likes, the kind of range where opponents will be trying to stick out buttons to reach you, all right? And there's where you're throwing fireballs, but sometimes you're also going to be going in, right? Right, sometimes you're going to be doing this, sometimes you're going to be throwing fireballs, sometimes you're going to be medium kicking, but generally you're going to mess about here, okay? So don't be jumping backwards, that's our first rule. The second thing that we want to be doing is we generally want to be moving around, right? There's 2 reasons for that. One is that, as I said before, if you're holding forward, it's really easy to do a Dragon Punch because you're already at the start. So all you need to do is a fireball motion after that. Right? That's quite important. When you're moving backwards, it's much harder to do a Dragon Punch. That's the number 1 reason why we do this. The number 2 reason, which is much more important at advanced levels, is that Street Fighter is really a game of spacing. This has become less true in more recent iterations of the game. So in classic Street Fighter 2, it's really extremely a game of spacing. In Street Fighter 4, maybe even more so a game of spacing. And what that's really about is you're trying to get your opponent to whiff. So what that means is that they stick out a button and it doesn't reach you like this, right? So when your opponent is doing something like that, let me go to the recording settings and just record Ryu doing something. All right, so Ryu's just going to sweep like that and then block. Let's not worry about this for a second. So when your opponent's doing something like that, you can punish them for it, okay? This notion, it's called whiff punishing, is very advanced, right? So obviously sometimes your opponent's going to do a dragon punch and you're gonna punish him for whiffing that. But this kind of neutral whiff punishing, where you're moving around, trying to make your opponent think that they can hit you, but then you step back and so they whiff, and then you can punish their whiff. This is really core to Street Fighter 2, 3, 4, 5, but much less important in Street Fighter 6. And you really don't start to see it a whole lot until, like I said, high diamonds. So don't worry about that stuff very much at all. Nonetheless, we want to get in the habit of moving around just so that our opponent has more to think about, right? Even if our opponent's deciding whether to jump at us, we can be at slightly different ranges. So sometimes they're going to jump over our head. Sometimes they're going to come up short and miss. Sometimes they're going to catch us just with the toes, right? And that's important for us to think about too, about the ranges, right? And the other reason why we want to think about ranges is because we usually want to be touching our opponent with our toes like this and getting them with the fireballs. All right, so get in the habit of moving around. That's number 2. So not moving backwards, moving around, mostly forwards, like slight bias towards moving forwards. So we're closing that space, but generally just moving around. And then finally, we want to integrate crouching blocking occasionally, right? Now, the reason for that, particularly at the low levels, is that a lot of people just wander around doing this, right? They're just obsessed with that. Later on in the game, there'll be a lot of situations where your opponent is trying to back out of pressure, and then you're going to try to sweep them as they back away. So you do a lot of stuff like this, right? Because your opponent's going to block this, but they're not going to block that, okay? Because they think that you're leaving, but actually you're just moving back to do this, right? Okay, so get used to moving around and get used to crouch blocking occasionally. If you go and watch some professional players, Punk, Takedo, these kind of types, you'll see that they're doing this a lot, right? If I wouldn't do this, right, because this actually doesn't work very well. Right now I'm just holding back and pressing down occasionally. And whenever I press down, I can't get swept anymore, right? But generally speaking, you more just want to be crouch blocking occasionally, and you're actually hoping that your opponent tries to sweep you and you block it. And we'll explain why in a second, right? But we're just going to get used to this kind of stuff. All right, here we get to our first drill for moving and poking, all right? So all you're going to be doing in this drill is pressing medium kick. So this is your kind of range spacing button. If you're feeling a bit advanced, you can also stick in light kick, which you also use for range and spacing. But we'll just start with medium kick. Every now and then, you'll also throw a fireball, right? But don't really worry about pressing heaps of buttons. Don't really worry about pressing heaps of attacks. Just worry about moving. What we're going to have the dummy do, so here we start to talk about recording settings. So get used to the training room. It's super important. All right. So we're going to have our training room settings. So what we want to do here, let me just delete all of these. So if you want to delete stuff, you just press backspace. Is that right? We go over here. Yeah. Okay. So this is where we do the replays and we, cycle across to start recording. So the first thing we're going to record is just Ryu moving backwards and forwards, and then finishing moving forwards. All right. So back and forward. That's it. That's all we want. And then same thing, but finishing moving backwards. Okay. And now let's put these on. If you see the stuff at the bottom, we want to select this and make him do it 3 times, right? What that means is that it's kind of the program is more likely to choose these actions. Right, now you want to go back into your shortcut settings and find what replay save status is, or set that to a button that's nice, okay? And you also want play recording. So what we're going to do now is just set Ryu to play that recording, all right? And we're just going to check that that worked, right? So now Ryu's kind of movement looks a little bit more realistic, yeah? All right, nice. Now we want to turn off that playback. We want to go back into our recording settings. Oops. We actually want that off, but it doesn't matter. Okay, and now we're going to tell him to do a sweep and then block. Nice. Okay. So that's the only thing we want Ryu doing. Let's go back to the start and play the script. All right. Just every now and then, we're just going to jab him out. Fireball. He's not throwing out the sword. There it is. All right, so I've made this a little bit too frequent. Let's just put it down to 1. Oh, there we go. Oh, we got caught. All right. Nice. Okay, see how I pressed my heavy kick and it went over his head? Yeah, so that's a bad punish. That's also a bad punish because we're not compensating. So what we want is that when Ryu sweeps us, oh, he's not really feeling sweepy. Oh, he got me. All right. So this is what we're trying to practice. Ah, this is why I am forever a scrub. All right, let's try again. Oh, now he doesn't want to sweep. All right, see that there on the left? It says punish counter. That's what we're looking for. Now, we have to learn a little bit what's going on at the bottom of the screen right now. So you can see where it says startup total advantage. And then at the bottom, you've also got startup total advantage. So at the top, that's my numbers. So you can see that was a 9-frame startup, 34 frames of total activity in that move. And it doesn't say anything about advantage. And at the bottom is reuse stuff. And then you can see those colored bars. That's telling you the breakdown of that move. So we had a 9-frame startup. That's where we can see the 8 colored bars. I'm colorblind, so I don't actually know what that color is, but like green, I guess, or gray. Then you have 3 active frames. So the 9th frame, as it says startup, is 9 frames. So on the 9th frame, you got the red block, and that means that it's active. So at that point, if it touches the opponent, it hits them, right? On the first 8, nothing happens if it's in the opponent's space because it's not active yet. And then you have the 23 frames of recovery. So that's where your button has gone out and now it's coming back in. And that's where you can whiff punish your opponent. And basically what happens when Ryu does his sweep is that if I catch it on the recovery frames, then I get a punish counter. All right. Now, one way to do that is to see him whiff, right? But another way to do that is just to block. All right. Now, you saw that when he blocked, it says for me there, advantage 12 frames, and for him, advantage minus 12 frames. So what that means is that after I block, I recover from that block. I come out of block stun 12 frames faster than he does recovering from his attack, which means that I can act and do something 12 frames before Ryu can do something. Now, 12 frames is like an eternity in this game. Some of the slowest buttons, like solar plexus, are more than 12 frames. They're 20 frames long. But this is one of Ryu's slowest buttons, the heavy kick, and that's 12 frames, right? So usually when someone does something that's 12 frames negative against you, you can often punish it with this or with heavy punch, right? But the sweep, because Ryu's crouching afterwards, you need something that can hit them sweeping, and this happens to go over people who are crouching. But heavy punch doesn't, right? The reason why you often don't want to use heavy punch is because sweep is quite long range. Oof. But heavy punch is so good. Yeah, see there I whiffed it. Right, so if Ryu spaces his sweep out well, I can't punish it with heavy punch. Oops. But I can always punish it with sweep. Alright? Now when you punish something during its recovery frames, either because you've put out a move that's faster than the minus that Ryu had. So remember that this is a 9-frame startup button. He's minus 12. So my 9 frames gets out before his 12 frames of recovery, and so he gets hit. If you hit someone in that situation, or when you're whiff punishing, so they've put a button out, their foot's still out there, and you hit their foot, then you get the punish counter, right? All right. Okay. and we want punish counter. I'm going to explain punish counter later because it really doesn't matter right now, and it is very complicated because it changes the frame data. But in any case, you'll know in this exercise whether you've done a good job because you'll get punish counter. That means that you pressed your sweep fast enough. If you don't get the punish counter, that means that Ryu actually recovered from his sweep in time to block like that, right? And that's what we don't want. So we want to do it fast enough that we get the punish counter, and that's all we're doing here. All right, so go back into your recording settings, turn on all three of these. So he's moving around, and we're just going to poke him. Whoops, see that? That's what we don't want. Whoop. That's what we don't want. Oosh. Right, now you might be wondering, if sweep's so godlike, why are we using this? Well, you see that that's -4, that medium kick. That means that unless Ryu's really close so that he can do a jab, this is not punishable, right? This is what we call a safe move. So we're just going to push that out a lot because it's hard for our opponents to do anything about it. All right. Moving around, blocking. Whoops. Ugh. Whoops, not so easy. Punish counter. Occasionally we throw a fireball. Whoops, don't do that. So come back to neutral when you hit. Okay, so this is an 8-frame or 9-frame button, so I can also punish sweep with that. But generally speaking, we want to punish it with crouch heavy punch, crouch heavy kick. Now remember that we're trying to move around, right? Boom. All right, we'll get better at it as we go. Now we don't want to be retreating too much. Right, we're just going to do this for ages. And what we want is a situation where we just don't get swept. That means that we know that we're moving around well, we're blocking well on the crouch position, we're able to punish his sweeps, and then occasionally we should still be getting our pokes in. And that's going to be our basic game plan for pretty much the entirety of, iron and low bronze. All right, so that's our first drill, just using kick medium, punishing with sweep, throwing fireballs occasionally. If you get really fancy, then you can do heavy punch into fireball, but that's technically a combo. So we're not going to worry about that later, but that is the next thing that we're going to be working on. All right, we're going to be working on what's called our jump-in combo. So let's turn Ryu's movement off and let's go back to this neutral situation. Now, you'll hear in all the videos by the advanced players that jumping is a bad idea in Street Fighter, and basically that's true. So this takes forever. Look at that, 45 frames. Oh my God, so slow. Now, so when someone is jumping at you like this, unless your cognitive stack is overloaded, so you're focusing on like 12 million things, which is the way Street Fighter 6 works, you should be pretty easily able to anti-air them, right? These are Ryu's main anti-air buttons. You really want to just be using this one all the time. So when someone's jumping at you, you've got 45 frames, even longer if they're doing something like that, to uppercut them out of the sky, all right? So generally we don't want to jump because it's too easy to punish jumping. That said, at the lower levels, most people have really bad anti-airs, and the risks to reward ratio is quite high for jumping in. So if I do get a jump in, I'm going to do at least like 3,000 damage. If I uppercut, at most I'm going to get 1,200. Probably more likely I'm going to get about 1,000 damage. And so you can get 3 jump-ins. Sorry, you can get anti-aired 3 times before it's not worth it to jump in. And generally you want to get your anti-airs to the point where they're like 97%. So people just stop jumping at you, they stay on the ground. And why do they do that? Because why do we want them to do that? Because then we can really control the space on the ground with our fireballs. Okay, but what if our opponent is throwing fireballs? All right, well now we have to jump, right? So this is a situation that we want to get ready for here. So we're going to do this in 2 parts. First, we're going to practice our jumping combo, and then we're going to put it to a more realistic situation. So we just start here in the neutral, and we're just going to jump heavy punch. That's the first part. Then another heavy punch, and then we're going to cancel into our heavy DP. All right, so now's opportunity for me to talk about the difference between links and cancels. So a link is where you press a button, let's say punch medium like that. So you see that punch medium on hit has an advantage of 7 frames. So that means that if I recover from punch medium fully, as I am now, then I have 7 frames in which to press another button before my opponent can block, and that button will combo. Now it's the case that this button, crouch medium punch, is 6 frames. So 6 is less than 7. So if I go right, then I can get a combo. You'll see on the left-hand side there, 2 hits. 2 hits. That tells you that you combo. Right? The other way to practice this is to go into your dummy settings over here and put it to block after first hit. And then if we're slow, he'll block it. If we're fast enough, then we get the combo. Right, now this combo is called a link because what we're doing is recovering from the first attack in time to put out the second attack. In contrast, when you do a cancel, you don't finish the first attack. You don't recover from it. While your first attack is out, you input the command for the second attack, and then it cancels that first attack into the second attack. Right, and that's what we're doing here. So we're going to be doing a link, right? And if we too slow on it, then he's going to block. Right, and we don't want that. So we want to be quick enough to get that second hit in. Right, 2 hits there. Right, and then after we get the first link like that, we're going to cancel our heavy punch into the dragon punch. Right, we were too slow there, and that means that we're minus 39, and that Ryu's going to beat the shit out of us. All right, so we want to, again, do this 10 times. You might also want to work in a heavy kick there, just so you make sure you've got the timing for that, not just heavy punch. Now, why would we use heavy punch or heavy kick? All right, there's a couple of reasons. So one is the frame data. So you've seen a few times there that if I hit Ryu really high, like on top of his head, see how it's only 9 frames of advantage there? Which means that this button, which is 10 frames, doesn't come out in time. So I actually need to hit Ryu a bit deeper, kind of more like around his neck, and then I've got more frame advantage. And that way, I definitely get this out. Now, if I do heavy kick to the face, then I've got 10 frames there. And if we go lower, we've got even more. So sometimes heavy kick is going to be better for that because it's got ever so slightly better frame advantage. The other reason why we might use heavy kick is because it's sticking way out in front. So if we're far away like this, it's going to reach, whereas this will whiff. All right, so that's one reason. Heavy punch very rarely whiffs if you manage to connect with your jump in because it's got nice long range. Okay, so it seems like heavy kick's better, but actually jump heavy punch has one advantage, which is that it's more downwardly angled. You can see how Ryu's fist is really pointed down. Now sometimes against anti-airs like this, if the person's a little bit slow, it really helps to have that extra bit of downward angle. That's going to give you a little bit more opportunity to punch them in the face before they recover from their fireball than if you were to jump in with this, where you have to really wait for Ryu's body to fall down lower to the ground before you can get that active foot into their face. In any case, we just want to practice this combo. Make sure you've got 3 hits there on the side. Make sure you've got your dummy set to block after first hit. Once you've got 10 on the left, then again, we want to go into 10 on the right and uppercut this guy. All right, that's all we want to worry about. Okay, here we are. Back to our basic mode. All right, now we want to make this a little bit more realistic. So once you've got him doing that, then we want to really spread out all the way to the edge of the screen like this, save it there. And now we're going to set Ryu up to be throwing fireballs at us. Okay, so let's go over to our recording settings again. Where are we? Over here. Go down. And what we're going to do is we're going to have Ryu throw mostly light fireballs because better Ryus should be doing that. We'll talk about why in bronze. Okay, and Ryu's just going to be throwing light fireball. All right. Now, don't have him throw multiple. Just have him throw 1 fireball. That's it. All right. 1 fireball and block. Okay. That's all we want him to do. Then we're going to go over here and we're going to have him throw an OD fireball and block. Okay. And then we're going to go up here and we're going to have him do, actually, let's have a look. 2P drive gauge. We're going to have 2P drive gauge set to refill. And now if he just throws OD fireballs, he should be able to do that forever. Yeah, that's what we want him to do. Okay. So we're just going to have him throw OD fireballs, nothing else. So that's our first one. And then our second one, we're going to have him do jab OD fireball, right? And then we're going to have a third one, jab, jab, OD fireball, right? That's all he's going to be doing. And even a fourth one, jab, 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 OD fireball. Right. I got this one from Stack Bradford from Street Fighter V. It's a really useful drill. So let's go back to the start. And now what we want to do is neutral jump these fireballs, right? Right, and just learn to react to that fireball flash. All right, that's our first thing. I got hit because I dashed. Right. Why are we using OD? Because it's fast. All right, so just learn to neutral jump. That's all we're doing. Why are we neutral jumping? Let's talk about that for a second. I'll turn him off. So the reason why we're neutral jumping is that all characters except, I believe, Dowsum and JP can only have one fireball on the screen at a time. So if I throw a fireball and then I try to throw another one, you see I got that heavy punch there because I'm only allowed to have one fireball on the screen at a time. Now, if I'm like in the middle of the screen here, God, I suck, and my opponent throws a fireball, you see how that fireball is still on the screen for a while after I jump over it. That means he can't throw another fireball there, which gives me some time to walk forward, which is what I want to be doing. All right, and that jab's deliberately to throw our timing off, right? Okay, let's turn that off. Yeah. Oh, turned off the recordings. Okay, so basically we've got Ryu now throwing fireballs, and what we're going to do is either neutral jump the fireball or block. So if we neutral jump it, then we can walk forward a little bit, but we can also just block it and move forward. But you see how when we block it, it pushes us back quite a lot. Not so much that we can't get into his face, but it does push us back. The other thing it does is you'll see at the very top there is that it damages our drive gauge. That's one of the other nice things about fireballs, is that we can reduce our opponent's drive gauge using fireballs. So if you want to stop that, you have to block the fireball and then parry it. And that means that the fireball doesn't push you back as far. So this is a bit more of an advanced tactic. So I don't think we should worry about this. Just learn to neutral jump and walk forward. Block sometimes. Neutral jump. All right, and eventually we get to jump in on it. All right, so that's all we're doing here. Is just walking forward. All right, I'm just trying to learn not to get hit by the fireballs, and also to react to the jump in. All right, let's stop there. Okay, so that's our second drill, is jumping over fireballs. Now remember that we only want to use this movement, this jumping combo, against characters that are fireballing, or against characters that are just doing really slow, big buttons. So like if you've got someone who's just doing this on you all the time, right? That goes really far, and it makes it hard to approach this person from the front, or someone who's constantly doing this, or even constantly sweeping. Like this sort of stuff makes it hard to come into your opponent's face from the front. So then you want to jump over them, because this takes so long to recover that you will be able to get your jump in going while you're doing that. All right. But generally speaking, we just want to stay on the ground, and our game plan is just to poke, use our fireballs, and not get swept. Right? And if our opponent does try to sweep us, then we just sweep them back. All right. Now we're getting somewhere. All right. We've got a couple more drills to do, but really just one. All right. Let me turn off all of these. The last thing we need to work on is anti-airing. Okay. Now this is the most important thing in Street Fighter. And it's also quite difficult. So I think part of the reason why a lot of people find Street Fighter very frustrating is because this combination of sweep and jump in and having to block both of those is quite difficult. When someone is sweeping you, you have to block crouching. When someone is jumping in on you, you have to block just holding back. If you're crouch blocking, then someone jumps in on you, they're going to beat you up. Okay, so if we put the dummy to block all, and then we put the dummy's behavior to crouch, and you'll see that Ryu stands up in order to block my jump in. Right? That's because he can't block it crouching. So that's the same thing for you. If you want to block someone jumping in on you, you have to just be holding back. If you want to block someone sweeping you, you have to be crouching. Okay, so let's put him back to block after first hit, and he's standing up. Okay, so what we want to do though, ideally, is not just block someone jumping in on us, but actually anti-air them out of the sky. And for Ryu, this is really important because a lot of the way Ryu gets his offense started at slightly higher skill levels is to do the anti-air and then drive rush in on the person as they're getting up off the ground. It's a really big part of Ryu's game plan, and he's always had this like fireball trap game plan, which we'll talk about in bronze, where we throw out fireballs and then when our opponent tries to jump them, we uppercut. All right, so we need to practice this. Pretty easy way to do it is we go to recording settings, and we're just going to put our dummy. Let's make sure we're back in a neutral situation. So this is where you're going to be a lot, around this kind of range, throwing fireballs. So we want to be here, and we want to record the dummy doing two things. So we're going to do this one. First, they're just going to jump in and do that heavy punch that we've been doing, and then just block, right? It doesn't really matter what they do after that. And then the second thing we want them to do, oh, why didn't that come through? Okay, and then the second thing we want, I'm going to turn that off for a sec, go back to the neutral, go to slot 5, is to do drive impact. All right. Now, in the low grades, really all the way up to like Diamond 2, people would just be drive impacting all over the place. They'll just be walking around neutral pressing drive impact. They'll be doing whiffed sweep into drive impact. They'll be doing whiffed jump into drive impact. They'll be doing, what is it like? They'll be doing -4 move into drive impact. They'll just be doing drive impact, drive impact, drive impact. So one of the most important things in the early stages of the game is just to learn to punish drive impact. So when our opponent does do a drive impact, we want to press drive impact in response, and then we want to do our heavy punch, dragon punch, punish. Right, this is going to be our very simple punish in the early stages. We got here. Alright, now you'll see how as soon as I restart, he's doing it. So we don't want that. We want to have a little bit of a delay on this. So when you go here and select it, oh, you can't do a delay? Countdown. Okay, so we can do countdown of 3 seconds, right? And then that's weird. Recording trigger auto countdown. All right, well, I'm sure there is a way to change this so that it's a little bit slower. That's weird. Huh. There used to be a setting where you could tell it to wait like 2 seconds before it did things. Okay, well, anyway, so we want him to either drive impact, and we can just block it sometimes, or jump in on us, right? Now, when you're first starting out, just have him jump in on you, right? And again, just go until you can get 10 of these uppercuts, right? Generally speaking, we want light uppercut. And the reason why we want light uppercut is see down there on the bars at the bottom, it says 5 frames startup, all right? So oftentimes when people are jumping in on us, we are in a scramble situation. We're like, we're throwing a fireball. Oh shit, he jumped. So the fact that that is 5 frames, while this is 7, that 2 frames can save your life. Right? So we pretty much always want to be doing the light uppercut. The exception is when they're really far away like this. If we do light uppercut, it might actually whiff. Let me try it from here. Right, so we whiffed. And sometimes people will try to bait out a light uppercut by jumping short and neutral jumping, so they won't press a button. Because when Ryu's arm sticks out to try to punch us, that increases the size of his hurt box, so it actually makes him easier to hit. In any case, you just want to be practicing your dragon punch, right? And sometimes you want to be moving backwards and doing it. Sometimes you want to be moving forwards and doing it. But you just always want to be doing dragon punch, right? Okay. Try not to use these buttons. But if you're really struggling with dragon punch, then it's worth practicing these two. The timing is a little bit tighter because you have to make sure your active fist comes out at the right time. Really try and avoid this button. Why do we want to avoid crouch heavy punch? The reason why is that crouch heavy punch moves Ryu forward quite a lot. You can see that there. Look at the bars on the floor and how Ryu's moving forward each time he presses that button at the end, right? Now what that means is that when your opponent jumps from close to you like this and does a cross up, which we'll talk about in bronze, then Ryu's crouch heavy punch actually goes under the cross up and you get hit in the back of the head, or you get hit in the back of the head by this. And we really don't want that. Whereas light dragon punch, because it goes really straight up and it has this huge hurt box, it's like there's an umbrella of damaging zone above Ryu's head. It's much harder for people to jump over you like that. Let's have a look with the dummy. Right. So if the dummy's like right on top of me, then I'll whiff. But if the dummy's trying to cross me up like that, I'm still probably going to hit him. Right. Just generally, it's much harder to get Ryu cross up when you're using dragon punch. So just get in the habit of doing dragon punch, and of course remember that we always want to practice on both the left and the right, especially our anti-airs, because generally you're going to be better on one side than the other. I'm much better on the player 1 side than on the player 2 side. Now dragon punching when you're walking backwards is quite difficult, so make sure that you practice that. See, I got a fireball that time when I wanted an uppercut. Ugh, same again. Alright. Okay. Once you've done plenty of that sort of thing, he's got his anti-airs going, then you also want to set him to do drive impacts. Boom. See, I drove impact because I'm a fool. Alright, and so now that I've got two things to think about, it's immediately more difficult to react to both of them. Okay? Boom, boom. Alright, let's see what he does. Uppercut. Uppercut. Oh, I was too slow. Uppercut. Oops, too slow. Okay. Uppercut. Uppercut. I'll say one more thing about uppercutting in a second. Alright, let me just put it down to uppercut for a second. Do you see how there, like, Ryu's fist was like almost in my head before my uppercut came out? Right? It really looks like he's active, and yet I still win with my uppercut. Right? So even though my uppercut is so late, it's still winning. It's still beating his fist. The reason for that, and this isn't something that you can discern from the training mode data, is that Dragon Punch, this move, is anti-air invincible, or air strike invincible. So if someone is attacking from the air and your Dragon Punch has completed that 5 frames of startup and is now active, you actually are completely invincible to attacks that are coming in from the air. All right? So that's really fantastic, and that's a big part of what makes Dragon Punch such an incredible anti-air button. All right, so we want to do that drill too. We want to be practicing our anti-airs. Generally, we want to be practicing it just in this neutral situation. Once you get the anti-airs down, the drive impacts down, put both of them on, and also put the walking back on. And now Ryu's going to move around, and that's going to make it a bit more realistic for us. All right, so we always want to be trying to get some realism into our drills. Okay. Nope. Oops, I got dash instead of uppercut. Ooh, I got whiffed on it. Alright. So we're just practicing that, right? Yeah, see, that's what we don't want. So you can... Boom, we're splattered, right? Now, if you're really scrambling and you're struggling to get those dragon punches out in time, you can use these button anti-airs, but you just really want to get in the habit of being able to dragon punch because it's such a good anti-air button. Alright, that's our drill. Okay, so we've had a few drills so far. We've practiced our special moves, we've practiced our jump-ins, we've practiced avoiding fireballs, we've practiced anti-airing, and we've practiced punishing drive impact with our very simple counter drive impact and then going into punch, dragon punch. Now, when your opponent does that, they take so much damage. Like, let's not underestimate how much damage they take, right? So look at this. 960 and then another 2500, right? That's a huge amount of damage. The other thing that happens is that your opponent spends 1 bar of drive gauge, the bar underneath your health bar at the top, and then when you get the punish counter from drive impacting them back, they lose another 2. Right? Oh, 1.5, sorry. Okay, so they lost 2.5 bars of drive gauge and about 2,500 damage. Yeah, so 2,200 from that, and then another like 500 from the drive impact. So they lost nearly 3,000 health and a lot of their drive gauge just because they were randomly throwing out those drive impacts. So if your opponent beats you by hitting you with drive impacts, obviously that's frustrating, but this is a good situation for you. Right? You know that this person is taking mad risks, and that if you can just tighten up your reactions to those drive impacts, you'll be able to beat them comfortably. All right, so really be practicing countering those drive impacts. All right, we're so close to done. The last thing we need to talk about is just what to do when we've knocked our opponent down. So let's go back to dummy settings, make sure our dummy is on block after first hit. Oops. Let's also make sure that we've turned off all the recordings, and we're back to here. All right, so say we knock our opponent down. What do we do then? The first thing I want you to stress is you're wearing iron, all right? We're beginner to the game. Don't do anything. Just walk backwards, all right? The reason for that is a lot of people are going to wake up with drive impact. So what does that mean? If we go here to reversal settings, wake up reversal, then we can go here to common actions, drive impact, turn this on. And now when he gets hit, he's gonna wake up with drive impact, right? So a lot of people will be doing that. The other thing that people will be doing is they were waking up with invincible uppercuts, right? The reason why they do that is because that OD uppercut, let's have a look, is invincible. So you can see there the first 5 frames have that like scratchy white gray box. That means that those are invincible frames. You cannot take any damage while you do that. So if I knock Ryu down, right, my punch didn't do anything, right? He just blasted straight through my punch. And see, it says there on the right, counter hit. Counter hit. So I tried to hit him, but his invincible uppercut didn't care and he just blew through me. Most players in the low grades, they just don't like to block. They never wake up blocking. They might also wake up doing supers sometime. They might wake up jumping sometime because they think you're going to throw them, right? So generally speaking, I would say just don't do anything. When you knock someone down, just chill, right? One thing you might want to do if you're feeling a bit sneaky is just walk up a bit and then walk backwards, right? So pretend you're going to punch them or throw them or something, but actually just walk away. And then what you're hoping that they will do is one of these guys, and then we can get a fat punish on them, all right? Generally speaking, in the low levels of Street Fighter, you're just letting your opponent kill themselves. That can be really frustrating initially for you because there's so many things that your opponents are doing, but trust me, like 90% of what they're doing is unsafe. There's very easy ways to punish it. We're going to talk about that a lot in Bronze 1, right? But for now, we're just doing our pokes, we're doing our fireballs, and the main thing we're punishing is when our opponent jumps. When our opponent jumps, we're going to uppercut them. That's going to give us 1,000 damage, and then we're just going to be threatening them again with the fireballs. Now be careful with fireballing as people get up, because if you're really close to them and they wake up drive impact, then they'll armor your fireball and hit you in the face, right? So generally speaking, just try to wait to see if they do something stupid when they wake up. But mostly you're just going to be doing this, anti-airing. If you're really struggling with DP and you just want to win some matches, then use back heavy punch. Do not use crouch heavy punch, right? Back heavy punch is your friend. It's a much better button because it goes straight up above Ryu's head, and so it will stop those cross-ups. Okay, let's finish with a brief discussion of our game plan. All right, so let's go back to Ryu just walking around, right? So Ryu's just walking around, and our game plan is just going to be this. We're just going to crouch block so we don't get swept. Oh, so you got out of our range there, but that's all right. Fireball. Now don't be walking backwards all the time. Yeah, bully them. Bully them with that. Bully them with heavy punch. Oops, not that one. Just heavy punch. Yeah, heavy punch. Heavy punch. Fireball. And always light fireball, right? Trust me on this. We'll talk about it later, why. But this is all we're doing. And then usually your opponent's going to get frustrated with that and they're going to try to drive impact. So we don't want to be putting these buttons out too much. Sometimes we just want to throw a jab out so that our opponent thinks we're going to do a fireball, right? But actually, it's just a jab. Remember our drill when we were jumping over the fireball and Ryu was jabbing occasionally? It's the same thing here. But occasionally, we're just going to walk towards them and do this one. Get out of my face. All right? And then occasionally Ryu's going to try to sweep us and we're going to sweep him back. All right? That's our whole game plan at this level. All right? The last thing I want to talk about before we move to bronze is mindset. All right. So when you are practicing Street Fighter, when you're trying to get better, do not worry about your rank. Do not be like, oh, I really want to get to bronze. I'm so close to silver, whatever it is. You're trying to get better at particular skills. You're trying not to build bad habits. You're trying to develop an overall understanding of the game. There are ways to get up to diamond really quickly, just doing stupid shit like whiffing sweep and then doing drive rush, right? Because most people at this level are incapable of whiff punishing the sweep. They'll realize that you've done a sweep, but they'll realize too slowly. They'll be, oh, they did a sweep. I'll sweep back. But it'll be too slow by then, so your drive impact will come out, it will armor the sweep, and you'll punch them in the face. But this is a really, really bad habit, right? So you can rank up quickly to gold doing this, but once you're in, say, platinum, people will annihilate this game plan because they'll see you doing it and they'll be like, oh, this is one of these whiff into DI type people. I'll just wait when they whiff and then I'll punish them with the DI. And later on, punishing DI, it's not just going to be heavy punch, dragon punch. It's going to be some absolutely massive combo with the drive rush, and you're going to eat 1,000 damage. All right, so don't be doing that. All right, it's going to be something like this. All right, 3,500 damage just for drive rushing. Sorry, for doing a drive impact. All right, so don't get into these bad habits. We're just trying to develop good habits, and we're just trying to learn some fundamental knowledge and be able to execute some basic skills. So like here, we've got our basic punish with our heavy punch, dragon punch. We've got being able to punish sweep. We've got moving around and crouch blocking so that we don't get swept. We've got frustrating our opponent with fireballs and pokes. We've got anti-airing, punishing drive impact, right? That's quite a lot just to get through iron. The main thing in iron is going to be anti-airing and poking, right? That's really going to be 90% of what's going on here, all right? But I think if you've got these things, you will get to iron easy, all right? So focus on getting better skills. Focus on one thing each session. So when you come in, maybe the first thing to focus on will be punishing drive impact. I don't know. There's so much drive impact in the lower grades. But just focus on one thing and seeing that you can translate that from here in the training room into your actual gameplay. And remember that these games are really hard and it takes a really long time. I think I'm especially bad at fighting games. In fact, part of the reason why I kept playing Street Fighter is because I sucked at it so much and I wanted to kind of explore what it was like psychologically to persist with something that I was really bad at. That's why my handle is Forever Scrub, because I'm so shit. Even though I've got 2 characters in Master, I still think I'm just naturally bad at this game. Like I have very bad reactions. It takes me ages to learn stuff. So I think it took me about 1,200 hours to get to Master. I don't think it would take most people that long. So I started in Street Fighter 5. Here in Street Fighter 6, I think it took me about 300 hours to get Luke to master, and then probably another like 400 to get Ryu to master, because I think he's just a much weaker character, or I'm bad with him. If you look at the pros, like Broski played Street Fighter 4, and then he had 6,500 hours in Street Fighter 5. So that's why he's so good. Okay, so it takes a really long time to get good at these games. Last thing I'd say is that this game is really tiring. There's a lot of things that you need to pay attention to, and your mind will get exhausted. So my suggestion is that you spend a lot of time in training room. When you're ready for a fight, go to open matchmaking settings. Go and find your character. So you see that recently I've been playing my boy Ryu. You can update character settings. So I like this costume. So get your character going, and then go into matchmaking settings and turn on ranked. Don't really bother with casual. Sometimes casual can be fun because you'll play people who are much higher ranked than you, which can be a good learning experience. And sometimes I like to warm up with a casual match or two, but I think until you're in gold, you can really just play ranked. Don't worry about whether you're winning and losing. Just play ranked, turn that on, and then get into a match. And once you've played at most 3 matches, just take a break, okay? You need to take a break, even just for like 5 minutes. Especially if you feel your heart beating really fast, if you feel angry, tilted, as we say, if you feel salty. Yeah, just take breaks, come back to the training room, practice the thing that you're trying to set as your intention for that session, and then get back into the matches and see if you can apply it in the match. All right, I hope this Iron video was interesting. You can see that there's a lot to know even in Iron, but honestly, if you've got your anti-airs and this medium kick, you should be able to get to bronze, and then I'll see you in the next video.